Welcome to the Future of Berkeley Candidate Forum on Climate, Housing, and Transportation. My name is Jeff Baker. I am the moderator for tonight's forum, and I am the panelist from Berkeley Neighbors for Housing and Climate Action. I am joined by Ben Gardstein from Walk Bike Berkeley. Last week, we held our forum for candidates for mayor and for District 3. Tonight, we are holding forums for districts 2, 5, and 6.
Right, good.
We have invited all the candidates who are on the ballot, qualified for campaign financing, or have otherwise demonstrated equivalent support. And the way that we are going to run the first session here for District 2, so we have 2 participants, so we are going to allow each candidate to have 1 minute to introduce themselves. And then we are going to trade, having questions. We'll start with one from BNHCA, and then Walk Bike Berkeley will give one, and each candidate will have 2 minutes to respond. We'll alternate which candidate goes first, and by a fair coin toss, I arrived at starting with Terry Taplin. Time permitting, we will have additional questions at the end that have been submitted. There will be a link in the chat. There already is a link in the chat you can use to submit any questions from the audience. We're recording the session, and we're going to post it to the BNHCA YouTube channel afterwards. You can look for that probably early next week. So let's get started with District 2. We have disappearing candidates. We have Jenny Guarino and Terry Taplin joining us tonight. Terry, since you won the coin toss, essentially, why don't you introduce yourself?
My name is Terry Taplin. I'm a Berkeley City Council member, mobility justice activist, and caregiver for a disabled parent. I entered public service after almost being displaced from Berkeley when my husband and I lost our apartment, and upon moving with my mother, witnessing how her mobility loss impacted her ability to move throughout the city. During my time on council, I have steadfastly championed housing reform, safe streets, and modal shift. I fought for our housing element, the end of exclusionary zoning and parking minima, middle housing, a safe Hopkins, a multimodal San Pablo corridor, the electric ferry at the Berkeley Pier, and neighborhood traffic calming throughout West and South Berkeley. I have passed legislation for an affordable housing zoning overlay, social housing pilot study, transit, cycling, pedestrian mobility improvements along the 51B route, and funding to advance the bicycle and pedestrian plans and Vision Zero along key routes like 9th Street and Addison. Thank you. Happy to be here.
All right, thanks for joining us. Jenny Guarino, you get a minute to introduce yourself.
Thanks so much. I'm Jenny Guarino, and I'm running for Berkeley City Council in District 2. I'm an elected head steward for UAW 4811, the union for student employees at Cal. I'm also a graduate student at the Goldman School of Public Policy. I'm a union leader. I fight every day to make sure that my union siblings are paid fairly, treated with respect, have safe working conditions, and I hope to extend this fight to the rest of Berkeley. I'm deeply invested in labor rights, housing affordability, community safety, including street safety, and most importantly, accountability. I'm committed to staying true to my campaign platform, to attending all city council meetings and council committee meetings, to responding quickly to constituents in need of services, to responding to community groups when they reach out to the office, and to engaging respectfully with those whom I disagree. I think that District 2 deserves that in a council member, and deserves a council member who will support tenant protections, who won't filibuster labor protections for shift workers during COVID, and who will advance humane solutions to homelessness and not destructive sweeps. I'm honored to have the endorsements of the California Democratic Party Renters Council, the Wellstone Democratic Club, the John George Democratic Club, our Revolution East Bay, the Berkeley Tenants Union, amongst others, and I'd be honored to have your support as well. Thank you.
All right, thanks. So let's move on to the first question. And Jenny, you'll get to answer first. You'll have 2 minutes to answer. The city is currently evaluating ways to end exclusionary zoning and enable so-called missing middle housing. City Council committed to this 4 years ago, but the final action may be delayed until next term. If the issue does come before you, which policies will you propose to further missing middle housing?
Yeah, I'm definitely in support of the missing middle housing policy. I think that it's not, the silver bullet to solve affordable housing. I think that it would need to be accompanied by, right to return policies and tenant protections. But I think that, building, I think that building housing is good. I think that building market rate housing comes with, affordable housing as well. There's a certain quota that developers need to meet when they build market rate housing. And so I think that by investing in the missing middle, we will, that's a step in the right direction to addressing the housing affordability problem that we have here in the Bay. Again, I take the approach of like all of the above. I think that this is one strategy that we need to take amongst others that should accompany it. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. Same question over to you, Councilmember Taplin. I can repeat it if you want.
No, thank you. I support the motion that would have allowed for multiplexes in residential neighborhoods throughout the city while exempting the very high severity fire hazard zone, while allowing us to add middle housing to neighborhoods that currently have multifamily construction, like Northside and Pratt Row. I look forward to the results of the evacuation study. But when it comes back to council, I will be fighting for what I fought for and have fought for these past 4 years. To that, I would add, though, I do think there is a place for a design review if it results in a more pleasurable built environment that allows us to actually build housing.
All right, thank you. And you've actually touched on the future topic of this forum, but I'm going to give it over to Ben for the first question from Walk Bike Berkeley.
Hey everyone, thanks for joining me today. I'll just start by noting that Walk Bike Berkeley is an all-volunteer organization that advocates for healthy, equitable, sustainable transportation system in Berkeley for people of all ages and abilities. Our first question is a question that you will hear us pose to each candidate this evening, if you stick around for the other district races as well. Walk Bike Berkeley supports the Safe Streets Measure FF, because it is the most fiscally responsible and effective way for us to fix our crumbling streets while also updating them with life-saving mobility and safety improvements that help us achieve our climate goals. We oppose Measure EE. Please explain your positions on Measure FF and EE. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I am in strong support of FF and I've endorsed it, and having grown up in between 2 freeway entrances and multiple city entrances, and having my neighborhood bisected by San Pablo Avenue and seeing the impacts of speeding and seeing how speeding increased after 6th Street was paved without safety measures, I consider it a dereliction of our duty as city officials to not tend to the safety of our roads. To me, it's a no-brainer. Safety and our roads have to be prioritized for travel and safety, and everyone has a right to be able to move throughout the city safely without risking their lives, risking the lives of their loved ones. And I recognize that it's challenging to see the built environment change. It's challenging to think of new ways to get around, but I think that as a city, we have to prioritize safety above car storage and auto-centric biases. Kindly and respectfully, thank you.
Yeah, I'm very much in favor of Measure FF, and I helped campaign for it with UAW 4811, which also, works with the Safe Street Coalition. And making our entire city safe for walking and biking is both a basic public safety priority and critical for addressing climate change. When I'm canvassing for my campaign, I speak with a number of parents and with young children who raise the issue of bike and pedestrian safety as a huge priority for investment, and I think that this measure would help address that. The 2017 bicycle plan suggested that some 90% of Berkeley residents would consider biking if only it were safe to do so, and so making our neighborhood safe for walking and biking is absolutely necessary for our community's future and safety. Additionally, I don't think that Measure EE would raise sufficient funds. And I think that it has an unworkable and overly complicated oversight structure. And so that's why I support FF over EE. Thank you.
All right, great. Thank you very much. Let's move on to our second topic on housing. One of the key questions on housing in Berkeley is the handling of the hillside overlay and the hard to remember, very high severity fire hazard zone. Fire risk is a major concern in our city. And on the other hand, the hillside overlay contains some of the most high resourced neighborhoods in Berkeley and the majority of our single family zoned areas. What do you think is the best approach to balance the concerns between fire risk and the commitment to more equitable housing citywide? And we'll start with you, Jenny.
Yeah, I think that the proposal that my opponent and council member Luna Parra put forward previously in, I think, the July council meeting to further upzone those areas was the right approach. Unfortunately, it didn't pass. I think that, fire risk in the hills is driven by narrow winding roads and street parking and not the density of housing itself. In moderately high fire risk zones, the increase in density should be coupled with expanded red curbing. And only zone 3, which is the highest risk area, should have strict limits on new building. And while I understand that risk around increasing density in high fire risk zones, exempting the hillside overlay is a political ploy that only entrenches Berkeley's original sin of segregationist single family zoning. I believe that the city can strike a balance to investigate and mitigate the risks of evacuation in high fire risk areas while also encouraging the development of new housing in the widest, most affluent parts of Berkeley. With missing middle specifically, I believe that the council should adopt the planning commission version of missing middle and temporarily delay the high fire zone areas until an evacuation study is completed and street parking is removed on narrow streets.
All right, thanks. Same question to you, Terry.
Thank you. As chair of the Public Safety and Facilities, Infrastructure, Transportation, Environment, Sustainability Policy Committees, this is something I think a lot about, and I've been quite a bit of touch with the fire chief about. It's important to remember that with SB 9, we currently have up to 4 units already allowed in the hillside overlay. It's also important to remember that some of the streets in the overlay are relatively flat and relatively wide and have large structures. And we also have households with multiple vehicles, and we also have many streets in the hills, in the fire zones that have a lot of on-street parking. If the issue is ingress and egress, we need to remove impediments to emergency vehicle access, which means we're going to have to enforce red curbing, and we are also going to have to rethink the allowing of parking along major evacuation routes. The issue is people getting trapped in cars, not people existing where homes are. Thank you.
All right, thanks. Let's go to the second question from Walk Bike Berkeley.
Okay. So our second question is, what is your, as the District 2 representative, what is your long-term vision for transportation along the San Pablo corridor? How can the city's San Pablo specific plan, which is being developed now, support that vision?
Thank you. In addition to being vice chair, I'm also the city's delegate to the ACTC. And I do want to thank the agency for all of their work. My vision is very much in line with the county's vision for a safe multimodal corridor with pedestrian crossings up and down the avenue, bus bulb outs. I support extending the bus and bike lanes in up to Hines. I support the bus lanes all throughout the avenue. There's some discussion around how to handle the parallel routes. And so I do support the investments we're getting from the federal and state, the Fed and the county to improving our parallel routes. But I am also open to revisiting protected lanes on the avenue in the next several phases of the project. I do want to be cognizant that this is an ongoing engagement process. And I do want to ensure that both we as a city as well as the county continue to engage stakeholders and also engage a variety of stakeholders, including the mobility activists and neighbors, the senior homes and everyone. But my priorities are always going to be mobility and safety over and against parking and auto lanes.
Yeah, I definitely think that the development and execution of the San Pablo specific plan will be critical for defining District 2 for years to come. I'm committed to ensuring that the plan prioritizes high density housing along San Pablo, specific investments in affordable housing by the city, bicycle and pedestrian improvements along and leading to San Pablo, including traffic calming on San Pablo itself. And investments in new and revitalized green space. And I think that the city must prioritize fulfilling the goals outlined in our sixth cycle housing element. And, I also want to mention that obviously like San Pablo is a dangerous corridor. It's controlled by Caltrans, which is, run by the state. And so we have some limited purview over San Pablo. But other cities are getting bus lanes put in on San Pablo and Berkeley isn't because of choices made by the city council. And so I think that that's something that we need to explore. I also want to make sure that any development and, infrastructure changes to San Pablo is accompanied by, bike and pedestrian safety. So we need, bike routes, we need, safe sidewalks, and yeah, these are absolutely necessary to accompany any sort of infrastructure changes that we see. So yeah, those are the approaches that I would take. Thank you.
All right, thanks. So my third question is, through the housing element, the city committed to upzone housing in high resource areas. This includes neighborhoods like Solano, North Shattuck, Elmwood on College Avenue. In District 2, which of these high resource areas exist? And what do you think are the best approaches to fulfilling this commitment in those areas? We're starting with you, Jenny.
Yeah, I think that in general, D2, has a lower income population compared to the other districts of Berkeley, and focusing upzoning on, the corridors that are most used in District 2. I think that there's an equity issue in doing that compared to upzoning, Solano or the other corridors that you mentioned. So I think that, we need to, in addition to focusing on upzoning these areas and making sure that there is development of affordable housing, we need to make sure that that is accompanied by, right to return policies and, protections for renters, and the demolition ordinance goes hand in hand with that as well. So I think just being mindful about making sure that the new development doesn't lead to displacement and gentrification of current residents. Thank you.
All right, Terry?
Can you repeat the question, please?
Sure. Via the housing element, the city committed to upzone housing along high resource commercial corridors. These include Solano, North Shattuck, and College. Do any of these high resource areas exist in your district, District 2? And what do you think are the best approaches to fulfilling this commitment in those areas?
So none of those are in D2. We have San Pablo Avenue, which is a quote unquote priority development area. And I think we have a fair housing imperative to achieve parity between the high resource areas and our priority development areas. We see a fair amount of building along San Pablo Avenue. We have a higher base zoning than University, the other corridors. So I think it's really important that we see each of our corridors, whether they're in high resource areas, whether they're in my neighborhood, treated the same. But I think it's especially important that the high resource areas finally play their part and do their fair share to address the housing crisis.
All right, thanks. Send it back to Ben.
Okay, our third question starts like this. Berkeley needs a skilled, motivated, and fully staffed public works department to update our streets with safety and climate-friendly infrastructure. But the city has had persistent problems attracting and retaining staff within public works. How would you help address this problem as a council member?
Thank you very much. Our new city manager just started this week. Our new public works director started earlier this year. I'm deeply committed to working with both of them to transform our culture at City Hall, especially the culture on the dais. Far too often we see council setting staff up to fail and ridiculing them for returning referrals that we ourselves authored when we when we are met with the consequences of our referrals, so to speak. But as someone who has really prided myself on maintaining a productive relationship with city staff, I think it's really incumbent upon council members and community members to treat staff with respect and to allow staff, the agency, to exercise their expertise while providing opportunities to grow in their careers. People want to work in Berkeley. They read our plans, they see our goals, they want to participate, and then they get here and they're met with ridicule and derision every step of the way, and that's a huge problem. And now we have a reputation around the Bay Area for being places where where this happens to you. But a lot of that starts with council, because the community takes their cue from us. They see us treating staff a certain way, and then they mimic that, or they adopt those behaviors, so to speak. So I look forward to continuing to work with my colleagues to curb that behavior, call it out when we see it, and to be more vocal about supporting staff and standing up for staff. Like, there's been times in the dais when me or some of my colleagues have had to step in to do so, and I'm happy to do so. But I think it really is incumbent upon us as council members and community leaders to hold ourselves accountable for how we treat staff. And I think council. I mean, we're legislative and we set policy. We're not operational. I think it's council members should not be interfering with operations, and we really shouldn't be. We should kind of stay out of the way a lot more than many of us do.
Yeah, as Councilmember Taplin mentioned, I think that there has been a problematic culture at the city that has led to a high turnover of staff. And as myself, as a proponent for workers' rights and labor rights, I will absolutely keep that in office. I'm absolutely committed to making sure that workers feel safe and respected in their workplace. And I think that there has been an issue with that. I also think that, the turnover of the city manager, the new city manager, gives us an opportunity to kind of patch things up where things have gone wrong. And so I'm hopeful about that for sure. I also am committed to, being accountable to constituents and to the promises that I make in my platform, including workers' rights and protecting labor rights, like I said before, but also, just listening to staff and to constituents when they have an issue and respectfully hearing their concerns and answering questions. That's absolutely something that is required in a public servant. And I'm committed to doing that. Thank you.
All right. Well, we're flying along time-wise, so we have plenty of time to take some questions that are being submitted online. Again, the link, if anybody has a question that they'd like to submit, is in the chat of the Zoom. And one that has come up is to get the perspective of the candidates on the city's climate action plan and its progress. I'm sure you're both very familiar with it. The climate action plan sets out goals. Most of the goals have concrete progress markers by 2030 to eliminate some source of greenhouse gas or another. Every year, the city has a progress report on this plan, and most of the indicators, it would be hard to say that they're on pace for 2030 success. So what can the city do to better reduce greenhouse gas emissions and to adapt to that changing environment? And we'll start again with Jenny.
Yeah, as you said, the climate action plan is great, but it's definitely easier to put out a plan, than to actually fund and execute it. So, given that the city's largest source of greenhouse gas emissions is transportation, I absolutely support the bicycle and pedestrian plans and view them as a strong priority for infrastructure funding. I support Measure GG, though I do recognize concerns about its impacts on nonprofits. And, I would seek to revise and mitigate some of the details of the tax if it passes. The Berkeley Building Electrification and Just Transition pilot program is a great way to implement the just transition, investing in improvements that simultaneously reduce emissions, improve the lives of poor and middle-class residents, and provide good union jobs. I support increasing funding to that program, and I also support the BAAQMD's NOx standards and would oppose efforts to delay them or water them down. And additional policies that, we haven't really seen implemented yet are, adopting an interim policy to fill the vacuum left by overturning of the natural gas ban, amending building energy savings ordinance to require reasonable and cost-effective mandatory electrification and building envelope measures upon the sale of certain properties. I would support formalizing policies that encourage utility and neighborhood scale gas system pruning following retrofits. There are so many different policy opportunities that we could take. And those are all in my questionnaire. So thank you.
So yeah, building electrification gets a lot of attention, but transport is our largest source of emissions. So I think the city and council focusing more strategically on that to advance the bike and ped plan, to advance Vision Zero, to invest in electric micromobility, to move forward our transit first policies and electrify our fleets, I think will help us. Measure GG does fail to invest in the public utility infrastructure required to move the city's largest producers and jobs providers off of fossil fuels. I would love to see something that actually invested in the infrastructure that could allow us to electrify freight along the I-80 corridor and accelerate citywide EV charging infrastructure. But you know, these are all things that should work in tandem. But I think that with our limited resources and our limited staff capacity, we should be prioritizing the greatest source of emissions and the most cost-effective response measures. Another challenge that we have as a council is that every 2 years we have a whole new suite of priorities, and staff has to reorient and pivot all of their resources, all of their work plans to respond to that. So a more cohesive priority setting on behalf of the council members towards particular aspects of our climate action plan, I think will help us in the long run. Thank you.
All right, thanks. With the proviso that we're leaving 4 minutes at the end for the candidates' closing statements. Ben, do you wish to ask another question?
No, if there's one from the participants that you want to pull, that's great.
All right. I think that in light of the time, we should go to those closing statements. So let's hear from Councilmember Taplin again, and you've got 2 minutes.
Thank you so much for having me. My husband, mother, and I have lived through the housing precarity and mobility impairment caused by the failures of inclusionary and auto-centric policies. I am proud to have the support of the Alameda County Democratic Party, the Sierra Club, Berkeley Firefighters, the Alameda Labor Council, the Building Trades, NorCal Carpenters, East Bay Young Democrats, Latina Young Democrats, the Alameda County Asian Pacific American Democratic Caucus, East Bay YIMBY, and housing heroes like Senator Nancy Skinner, Assembly Members Fluffy Wicks and Alex Lee, Berkeley and Riverville Mayors Jesse Adegin and Courtney Welch, and Council Members Rashi Kasarwani, Ben Bartlett, Mark Humber, and former Councilmember Randy Robinson, and John Bowers. I look forward to continuing my partnership with you all to build the affordable, resilient, multimodal Berkeley that we all deserve. Thank you very much. You can learn more at taplinforcouncil.com. You can always call me.
All right, and don't think I won't. Okay, and Ms. Guarino, go ahead. You've got 2 minutes.
Thank you. I really appreciate everyone taking the time tonight to hear what we've got to say and ask questions. I really want to just stress that I am centering, accountability in my candidacy, and I want to make sure that all residents of Berkeley, especially D2, feel comfortable reaching out to their council member with any issues that they may have regarding community safety. Again, like a big thing that I'm hearing is street safety. When I'm canvassing, people just don't feel safe biking and walking around on their streets and commuting, and that's a big issue that we need to fix. I'm absolutely committed to, upholding the priorities that I center in my platform, in my office. And, I think that taking strategies like BerkDOT, for example, would be a really great way to implement community safety. And I would love to see something like that go forward. I think that there are elements of BerkDOT that we can implement without implementing the whole thing. As we know, there are some state law issues with that. But yeah, I just really want to stress that I am centering accountability and responsiveness, and yeah, just always want to hear from my constituents. So thank you.
All right, absolutely wonderful to have you both. Thank you for joining and taking the time. We're going to have a short break, and then we have got our next forum beginning at 6:45. So we'll take 10. And we'll be right here when we come back. Excellent, excellent. Welcome or welcome back for those of you who were here for our District 2 session. My name is Jeff Baker. I am the moderator of tonight's forum. This is the Future of Berkeley Candidate Forum hosted by Berkeley Neighbors for Housing and Climate Action and Walk Bike Berkeley. I'm joined by Liza Lutzker from Walk Bike Berkeley. Last week, we held our forum for candidates for mayor and for District 3. Earlier tonight, we did District 2. And now we're going to turn our attention to District 5. We have Todd, Andrew, and Soshana O'Keefe joining us. Thank you very much for joining us tonight. The focus of our forum is housing, climate change, and transportation. That's consistent with the mission of our two organizations. We will start with each candidate having a minute to give an opening statement and introduce themselves. Earlier, we had a coin toss, and according to the coin toss, Todd will be going first to introduce himself. Then we will alternate. You'll get a question from me. You'll get a question from Walk Bike Berkeley, and we've got 45 minutes. So each candidate will have 2 minutes to answer the question if they need 2 minutes. And we will also take questions from the public if they want to submit them. The link to the form is in the Zoom chat. So if anyone on the Zoom wants to have their question added to the agenda, go ahead and send it to us. We're recording the session and we will post it to the BNHCA YouTube channel. And in order to be respectful of all the candidates, we've muted everybody else. So with all that said, let's just get started. So Todd, you've got a minute to tell us about yourself.
Great. Hi, Soshana, and thanks for everyone for having me. I'm Todd Andrew, and I'd be honored to have your support. I came to Berkeley in 1999 and raised 2 kids here through BUSD. I've both owned and rented a home here, which I've done now in District 5 for 17 years. I'm running because I've been deeply involved in community service and advocacy and leadership for 6 years, which is when fellow residents told me they didn't feel seen by their government. I dived in, and the more I learned, the more I came to accept that we really weren't living up to our ideals and aspirations. So my priorities are driven by these deep conversations I've had with District 5 residents and beyond, and with fellow Berkeley leaders over the last 6 years. First, we need to communicate proactively with our fellow residents. Too many of them, unfortunately, just don't trust their own government. Second, we need to focus on our core responsibilities. We have some of the worst streets in the Bay Area, which is just part of the $2 billion in unfunded infrastructure liabilities. Third, we have to prioritize public safety in all its meanings: police, fire, street safety, and disaster preparedness. Finally, we've got to be sound stewards of public funds. Berkeley is one of the top spending cities of our size in the state, but we don't get good bang for our buck. You can find more information about the campaign and opportunities to get involved at andrewforberkeley.com. Thanks again, and I'd be honored to have your support.
All right, excellent. And then over to Soshana O'Keefe.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. Hello, Todd. Nice to see you.
Hi.
So my name is Soshana O'Keefe. I am a lifelong Berkeley resident, born and raised, class of Berkeley High, 1996. I've lived in District 5 for 17 years. My background is I was originally a lawyer. I worked as an immigration lawyer for a while. I originally thought that was the best way to service the public. It's a very deep value of mine, public service. Then actually I moved into politics after that, and I started with the Obama campaign, but then moved locally. I've been on the Zoning Adjustments Board for 11 years. I've been the chair and the vice chair for 2 years each. And that really got me interested in local politics and just serving the city that I love this city so dearly. I'm very proud of my work on the zoning board. I've approved over 10,000 units of housing, and housing is the #1 priority of my campaign. In addition to being on the zoning board, my day job is that I am a teacher at Berkeley High School. I teach math and computer science, just another part of my love letter to Berkeley. I love this community. I love serving it in many, many different ways. And I really look forward to being on council if I am elected, because it seems like the next best way for me to use all of my background and all of my love and all of my knowledge for the city to benefit the community. Thank you.
All right. Our first question is going to be on that housing topic. So the city is currently working through ways to end its exclusionary zoning by enabling missing middle housing. The city council committed to doing this 4 years ago. They haven't taken that final action yet. It may be delayed until the next term. If this issue does come before you on the city council, what policies will you propose or support? And because we're alternating, Shoshana, you'll go again.
2 minutes or 1 minute?
You've got 2.
Great. Thank you for this question. I'll answer the easy part first. I love missing middle housing. I will vote yes on it. But of course, the specifics matter. As I mentioned, housing is one of my #1 priorities. There are many ways to achieve it. And of course, it's a yes and approach. Missing middle is one of the major ways we can do it. And of course, single family exclusionary zoning is all bad policy and also immoral. So I'm very happy to do away with that. I would say I'm 100% in favor of missing middle as it stands. I'm open to very high numbers of units in buildings as long as the building envelope is within reason. The one caveat I have, I know you're curious about this as a District 5 candidate, is how I feel about increased density in the fire zones. I have struggled with this quite a bit. Housing is something I'm extremely committed to. However, public safety is also something that I'm extremely committed to. And it's difficult because these two things are in conflict for this particular issue. I am proud to be endorsed by the Berkeley firefighters, and I've spoken with them quite a bit. And I actually was convinced that the issue of increased density in the hillside overlay is actually concerning enough to ask for some limitations. Now, I don't know what those look like. I look forward to the results of the evacuation study that's being done. But in general, I'm 100% for missing middle housing as much as we can get in there. However, I do have some, I want to make sure we balance that in the hillside overlay with safety. I don't want to put more people in danger. It is actually quite a dangerous place to be developing. Thank you.
Sorry, I was muted. I said, over to you, Todd.
Oh, okay. Thank you, Jeffrey. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Great. So my view on housing in the city of Berkeley is heavily influenced by my background as both a homeowner here and a tenant, and having raised 2 kids here who I would like one day be able to think about coming back and could afford to live here if possible. And I really appreciate the fact that Shoshana contextualized housing in Berkeley as the leader in exclusionary and even explicitly racist housing from 1916 until the fair housing laws, both state and nationally, in the 1960s. It's a stain on our history. And unfortunately, what happened after the fair housing laws, state and nationally, was the Neighborhood Preservation Ordinance in 1973. And while that was not explicitly racist, it was exclusionary. And so I think that I was very gratified to hear her say that she supports ending exclusionary zoning throughout the city, because in many cases, the housing that would be built, multi-unit housing, would not be much bigger than some of the single-family residences that exist in my district. So I find that it's necessary to have empathy when communicating with my fellow District 5 residents about that, because they're fearful. And so you have to address it on a level and meet them where they are. I too am concerned about, is there anybody timing this?
I'm keeping time, and if you go way over, I'm going to hold up my watch, okay?
Okay, all right, thank you. I too am concerned about the hills overlay and the high fire hazard severity zones. I would say we need to do more to think about things the way they currently are, not just what the addition of more housing would mean. Because if we're really concerned about structure, size, and proximity, cars and people, then we already have a problem. And Chief Sprague, whom I've had conversations with, and the Berkeley Firefighters Association, whom I've had conversations with, they recognize this. And Chief Sprague wrote 2 great memos, one on the ADU and one on the Missing Middle Housing Initiative that addressed his concerns. But I would prefer that we have a comprehensive discussion about what it means to have real fire safety in the hills, because we have these big brouhahas over ADU housing and now over middle housing. And then we kind of go back to doing everything the way we've always done it. And I fully respect the fire department's wildland urban interface department. I did a walk along with them as they did studies on, or as they knocked on doors and told people what was going on with their property and how they could better fireproof it. But I'm
sorry, Todd.
I'm also interested in knowing.
I'm going to have to draw the line.
Did you lift up your? Okay, great. Okay, thank you.
On the time, I appreciate it. In the interest of fairness, we will try to keep the time limits.
Absolutely.
And with that, let's go over to Walk Bike Berkeley for their first question.
Great. Hi to you both. So Walk Bike Berkeley supports the Safe Streets measure, which is Measure FF, because it's the most fiscally responsible and effective way for us to fix our crumbling streets while also updating them with life-saving mobility and safety improvements that help us achieve our climate goals. We oppose Measure EE. Can you please explain your positions on measures FF and EE? Thanks. And I think, Todd, you go first.
Okay, thank you, Lisa, and thank you, Walk Bike Berkeley. I live right on Hopkins, and I do a lot of my errands and commuting, almost everything on a bicycle. And I live here right at the intersection of Monterey and Hopkins, and I can see what's going on. And I know you weren't asking me specifically about Hopkins, but the reason I wanted to address that is because it goes to two of my primary my primary priorities, which are to communicate proactively with residents and to focus on our core municipal responsibilities. And there is the need to focus on empathy with the people who oppose this, I think, because a lot of them do feel like they're going to be trapped in their homes. And we need to try and disabuse them of that. We need to also, I think, look at proactive measures such as the possibility of a shuttle. And I know hardcore transit advocates are going to feel not so good about that because it goes against seamless Bay Area, it goes against integration, it could cannibalize AC transit service. But at the same time, if we want people to seriously consider transitioning from their private modes of transportation to something that's more public and that will reduce traffic and congestion, I think we can do that. And that's an important point about street safety. If we give people opportunities to get around that don't involve cars, it's going to reduce traffic and parking problems, which is one of the main concerns of the people who oppose FF and are in favor of EE. And just to answer your question directly, I'm in favor of FF. It will provide more funding for streets. It will provide funding for sidewalks. It will provide safety improvements, not just on bicycle boulevards, which is not the high injury corridors, but on other streets as well. And it will provide the pedestrian safety improvements as well. Thank you.
To you, Soshana.
Thank you for this question. EE versus FF. Well, I'll start by saying that if just FF was on the ballot, I would be very supportive of it and vote for it. I hope that one of the measures passes rather than neither of them pass. We absolutely need to get some money to bring money in to repave the streets, sidewalks, all of it. Absolutely necessary. However, I am actually supporting EE, which I'm aware is not the correct answer for this forum, but it is the true answer. And I'm happy to explain why. My vision, so I mentioned housing is the #1 thing on my platform. The #2 thing is actually bicycle infrastructure. And I have some very specific ideas about what I would like that to look like. Todd just mentioned the bicycle boulevards not being a place of a lot of injuries. I believe that the bicycle boulevards are underutilized, and I think we could use the bicycle boulevard as our primary bicycle infrastructure. I have a vision to make them top of the paving list, so they're always nicely paved. Make traffic barriers every 2-3 blocks so that the only cars on those were local traffic, people coming to and from their homes. So there'd be essentially no cars on these boulevards, and of course improve crossings of large streets. If we were to do this, and also maybe expand it a little bit, like Rose Street was originally in the Bike Boulevard plan. So I'd like to look at adding that back into it. If we had this network of bicycle boulevards actually maximally usable and safe and appealing, I think we would have amazing bicycle infrastructure, and we wouldn't need to build all these other cycle tracks and other bicycle infrastructure that's being proposed. So because that is my vision, Measure EE much more closely aligns with that, which is why I'm choosing to support it. But I don't have anything against FF. It's just, it's not the one that matches my vision. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Let's go to our second housing question. It touches on something that both of you mentioned already, I think, which is that like one of the key questions in Berkeley is how to handle that hillside overlay and more broadly the fire risk. Fire risk is a major concern in our city, of course. On the other hand, the hillside overlay is one of the most privileged and wealthiest neighborhoods in Berkeley, and it contains the vast majority of our single-family zoned areas. What do you think is the best approach to balance those concerns about fire risk with the council's commitment to build more equitable housing in all neighborhoods? We're starting with Soshana.
Thank you for this question. Yeah, I already touched on this a bit. Balance. As I mentioned before, the balance is very difficult. There is no easy answer to this. And I just want to say again that I am aware of the optics and even more importantly, just the fundamental sort of paradox of a commitment to increased housing everywhere, equitable increased housing, and fire safety, which is a very real, very, very, very important, probably the most important thing for council to be protecting. Public safety is our number one thing, more than anything else. Fire safety, we're gonna have to red curb a lot, unfortunately, and I know that's going to be very unpopular among the residents, but I'm committed to it nonetheless because I think it's in the best interest of the city. We've got to do a lot more wild vegetation management, of course, on private property. We have to get incentives for people to actually be able to do that because it's a very expensive thing to do. And lastly, I don't want to leave the impression that I'm against any added density in the hillside overlay. I think that would be too extreme a position. I think there are certainly some parts where we could add quite a bit more density. And of course, already we all, everywhere in the state, you can put 4 units on one plot. So we're already going to have some density allowed anywhere in the hills. And there certainly are some places in the hillside overlay where it makes more sense to have density if it's a larger street, if it's closer to good evacuation routes. So I'd like to look at it a little more granularly to see how much density we could get to sort of minimize the friction between public safety and equitable increased housing.
All right, thanks. How about you, Todd?
Thank you, Jeff. I appreciate Shoshana's approach actually to this. I think I don't want to delay it any more than we already have because we already know we're behind schedule from the Missing Middle initiative that was passed in 2021. I think we're about a year and a half behind schedule. I would like to see us, though, at some point have a comprehensive discussion without running afoul of the state. I know we got slapped on the wrist by the Housing and Community Development Department in Sacramento and could have been subject to the builder's remedy, which I don't think anyone in the hills would like. So I would love to have a comprehensive discussion, just like I would like to have a comprehensive discussion over how we see ourselves in terms of street safety rather than arguing over every little thing we do. I would like to see us follow through on our plans. And I generally support the council action in, was it May or March, to await the evacuation study and the amendments that were passed. I think it was Mayor Adegin and Councilmember Kesarwani's motion. And I generally support that going forward. Again, Red curbing is fine. I think we need some incentives. I agree with that also in terms of what Shoshana is saying. The seismic retrofit transfer tax program has helped Berkeley get to high levels of seismic retrofits, higher, like twice as much as neighboring cities. So maybe we can look at something like that to help homeowners maybe build a place to park their cars or what have you to enhance fire safety in the city. I would also like us to look at the possibility of the vegetation management up there. And I've heard various things about whether the ukes are or are not gone on all the public land up there, and whether we could incentivize private property owners to get rid of theirs as well. Thanks.
All right.
Great. Hopkins Street, which has been mentioned, is a high injury street identified in the city's Vision Zero action plan, and also has many destinations that people traveling on bike or on foot want to reach. But last year, the city put Hopkins Street improvements on indefinite hold after hundreds of thousands of dollars, and countless staff and community member hours had been dedicated to updating and repaving the street. What is your proposed path forward for delivering the safety improvements recommended in the city's bicycle and pedestrian plans on Hopkins?
That goes to me. Okay. This was very meaningful to me, living right here and doing most of my getting around by bike. And I was heartened to see the unanimous vote of council and then the 8-1 vote, and then was very disheartened by what I saw subsequent to that, which I was on the previous call with Terry Taplin and Jen Guarino. Terry, I think, referred to council involvement, shall we say, in staff work. And under the council manager form of government, I don't want to get lost in the weeds here, that we've been operating under for over 100 years now. Council is the policy-making body, and staff executes and administers. That doesn't mean staff does whatever it wants, but the buck stops with council. So I was disappointed in council, and I'd love to see this come back and for us to once again have a big discussion over this, so it doesn't happen every time. I realize we have the 2017 bicycle plan, and we haven't executed on that. I think we've had 2 or 3 miles of additional bicycle infrastructure since 2017. And that's one of the problems with this government, actually, is that we don't follow through on what we say we're going to do, which is creates trust problems, creates failures like Measure L, which creates so many initiatives like we've got on the ballot, citizen initiatives. People don't trust their government. So we have to do what we say we're going to do. We can't just grandstand on the issue and then put it on a shelf. So I would hope that we can make Hopkins part of a bigger discussion about the kind of city we want to be as we add 15 to 20,000 people over the next 15 years, and envision what it's going to be like if all those people feel like they need to drive. Thank you.
Hopkins Street, the issue of District 5. Well, I'll just say first that the process that resulted in the plan that was eventually put on hold, indefinite hold, was really, really terrible. I'm sorry to use such strong language, but I appreciate, actually, Todd, I just want to say I really appreciate your bringing up over and over again the trust of the community. That's also something that I value very much. I think it's one of the most important things for a council member, to any representative, to hold as a priority. And I really believe that the in that case, that process, the community did not feel heard or consulted, and it actually really alienated a lot of people in the area. And I think that's terrible. And I, as a council person, I would never want such an outcome for in my district or any district. Going forward, we absolutely need to do something about that street. The first thing I would say is it enrages me that the paving, the much needed paving of Hopkins and addressing the problems of the intersection at Hopkins and the Alameda, which is a terrible intersection. Those plans have been put on hold now, tied to this bike lane issue. I think we should do those right away, and because that would already make that street much, much safer for everyone. Regarding the bike lane, one of the problems with the original process was only one plan was studied. And it was a plan that did not work for the merchants, many of the residents. I don't believe the fire department was consulted correctly. It was not the way to go. I mean, we didn't know if it was the way to go because we didn't even look at the other plans. There are several viable plans that take different approaches to balancing the needs of the merchants who do in fact need parking, bicycle access, access to the recreational facilities at King, access to the school for students. There's so many things happening in that small area. It deserves better. We need to look at all of the possibilities, study them all, take a good hard look, and really decide as a community after consulting with all the stakeholders and all of the public safety entities, which is the best plan. And that will take a while. I hope it goes quickly. I think it should be one of our highest priorities. So while that's taking a while, I think we should do the no-brainers, which is just repave the street, maybe paint that bike lane that exists so it's a little more visible, and deal with that horrible intersection at the Alameda and Hopkins, redesign it somehow. Thank you.
All right, thanks. So turning back to the topic of housing. So in our housing element, the city is committed to building housing along our high resource corridors. These include Solano Avenue, North Shattuck, College Avenue through the Elmwood, and other areas of the city. Thinking about your district, District 5, which of these high resource areas do you think of? And what do you think are the best approaches we can fulfill this promise to build housing in those places? And we'll stay with Soshana for 2 minutes.
Great, thank you for this question. This is one place where I believe we can further the agenda of more housing and equity at the same time. So I'm really glad you asked this question. Solano and North Shattuck absolutely both need to be upzoned. We need to there's no reason not to bring a lot more density to those areas that are very well served by transit and are extremely walkable. We need to be building extremely dense housing in all such areas through Berkeley, especially the high resource neighborhoods. Some of the problems with especially Solano, North Shattuck to some extent, is that the plots of land are very small and not actually conducive to development the way that we've seen in downtown and on San Pablo corridor, where we've seen a lot of great dense housing projects. So I think it wouldn't be enough to just upzone them if we just, wrote in like, oh, you can have 10 stories here. I don't think anything would happen because it doesn't really work with the way that the land use is divided up. So we'd have to really look at that if we wanted to actually incentivize denser housing, which I would very much want. It's complicated. I just want to acknowledge that. I don't think it's an easy thing to solve. We'd have to look at some way to incentivize like the combining of plots of land so that if a developer could actually acquire, 3 or 4 adjacent lots, then they might actually be able to build something that would pencil out. We'd have to look for creative ways to really actually write the law so that the development would actually happen, because market realities are the only thing that actually dictates what gets built. Thank you.
All right, thanks for that. Same question over to you, Todd. High resource areas.
Thank you, Jeff. First, I just want to go back to a couple of things that were said. The Alameda and Hopkins improvements actually have resulted in like 0 injuries at that intersection. So I'm a little disheartened that there's credence being given to tearing it all apart. I think they were changed to some degree, but they've been effective at preventing injuries. Up until the time they were built, there were injuries. Now there haven't been for a while. So people get used to things. 100 years ago, people had to get used, 120 years ago, people had to get used to the transition between horse and buggy and the horseless carriage. So it takes time to get used to things. The other thing is that bicycle improvements have been, not that I'm just a bicycle guy, but bicycle improvements have been shown to benefit the safety of everyone. Okay, so high resource corridors. I was very happy to see council members, I think it was Kesarwani and Taplin, insert the affirmatively furthering fair housing initiative in the housing element for the North Shattuck, Solano, and College Avenues. As to how we can facilitate it, I'm not sure it's all dependent upon market conditions. Certainly the interest rates now aren't conducive, but we've seen lots combined, I believe, downtown, and if it's in the economic interest of developers, they'll do it. My understanding, and I do have things to learn here and have conversations to have with people, is that when you upzone, the land value does go up, which in some cases means that you're facilitating housing, and in other cases means that it might make it a little more difficult. So I think we need to incentivize it however we can, especially given the sordid history of exclusionary zoning. And I will just say, to wrap up, as the Solano bid chair, board chair, I think that new residents in the Solano Ave corridor will help to revitalize our small businesses, which are so important to our city.
Thanks. Let's go to the third question from Walk Bike Berkeley.
Great. So Todd, this will go to you first. So Berkeley needs a skilled, motivated, and fully staffed public works department to update our streets with safety and climate-friendly infrastructure. But the city has had persistent problems attracting and retaining staff. How would you help address this problem as a council member?
So I've come from a working class. My brother and I have discussed whether we are working class or lower middle class. And my dad even has problems with the lower middle class because it makes him feel defensive about what he was able to do to provide for the family. But the fact is that we struggled, and I identify with working people, with people who don't rely on trust funds, with people who don't have inheritances. So I think the first and foremost thing is that we've got to be constantly aware of working conditions, benefits, salaries, make sure they're competitive. Not that we don't engage in good faith negotiations with worker representatives, but that we are always cognizant of that. But the working conditions could be significantly enhanced, in my opinion, if council exercises leadership through better interaction with staff, and perhaps if the city manager adheres as closely as possible to the council manager form of government and the roles that are supposed to be partitioned among that, meaning council is the policy-making body. It's like a board of directors, and then staff executes. Council members will always have constituent service issues that come up, like potholes or garbage cans that aren't being taken care of or what have you. Fine, go directly to staff on those. But in my view, council should never be approaching department and division heads to say, this particular initiative that we passed should not be in your unit. It should not be in transportation, for instance. It should be in Office of Economic Development. That should never happen, and it should never be allowed by the city manager, because it's like the Office Space movie. That guy had 8 bosses, right? And some of our staff members probably feel like they have 8 bosses, at least the mayor, and then the division and department head, and then however many council members want to put their fingers into the process. So set priorities for staff, let them do their jobs.
All right.
My turn.
There you go. I was just waiting for you to be highlighted. Go ahead.
Thank you. Yes, staff shortages, big problem, very, very big problem at Berkeley High as well. It's hard to find math teachers. So if anyone's looking for a job, it's a great one. Staff shortages are a big problem, not just in the public works department, but throughout the city staff. There was a relatively recent report by the city auditor about trying to figure out why we were having so much trouble hiring people. And my recollection is the big takeaways were poor training, lack of career advancement opportunities, and just a general sense of disrespect. One thing I remember, I don't know if it was in the report or if I just heard this, but that like the carpets weren't replaced for a really long time and they had big holes worn in them. Like these are small things that really matter for people feeling like they're respected by their employer and they have some pride in how they work. Same with our IT infrastructure that our city staff has to use is so old. It's terrible. And I'm a computer science teacher, so it hurts my heart. I actually really want to push for our city's IT resources to be upgraded. That would benefit staff, benefit our ability to collect data. It would make our city more secure against cyber attacks. There's so many reasons why we need to update that, and I think that would also benefit staff. So I really want to just look at improving all the working conditions in all the ways that have been identified. Of course, as Todd mentioned, that is mostly the purview of the city manager. So I'm aware of that, but I would certainly support him in any ideas he had or initiatives to improve along those lines. The last thing I want to say, something we can do on council, is be very mindful of the staff time that is required to carry out the things that we pass. I think a lot of times I've heard this, that people on council they just say, oh, let's have a study for this, let's do this. And we should do that, that's our jobs, but we should always be mindful, can staff accomplish this? Can they do that with the resources that we've given them? Because if we overwork people in our city staff, they won't want to work here anymore. And it's a death spiral. So we really, really need to be respectful of staff, knowledgeable about what they can do, what they are doing, and give them good facilities, good training, and an organized workplace. And I think we'll do better. Thanks.
All right. Great. So we're coming to the end of our allotted time, and I thank you very much for taking our 6 questions, joining us tonight. There is enough time left, of course, for your closing statement, and we've allocated 2 minutes, just same as your answers. So we're going to keep with the same rotation. Soshana, take a breath, and then you can close it out.
It's been great. Thank you so much for these really important questions. Closing statement. So I mentioned before, I am very well qualified for this position. I'm the longest serving member on the Zoning Adjustments Board. I know so much about housing. I have so much on the ground experience with it, and it's my #1 priority. So that's the most important takeaway I want you to have is as a housing forward organization. Secondly, I have a law background. I have deep ties to the city on every level. And in addition to having the expertise from all of that experience, I also have broad support across the city government. I have endorsements from a supermajority of the council, 7 out of 9 of the current council. I have endorsement from a supermajority of the school board, and I very much look forward to working with the school district to see how the city and the school district can work better together. That's one of my other campaign priorities. I have endorsements across labor. I have the Alameda Labor Council, Building Trades Council, and of course the firefighters, and a number of Democratic clubs, including and especially the Democratic Party. So I say all that just to make sure you understand that not only do I have really good ideas, but I can get those ideas done because of the relationships that I have and the respect that I've garnered from all of the other people you have to work with to get things done in the city government. So I love Berkeley. I love city government. It would be an absolute honor to serve on it, and it would be an honor to have your endorsement. So thank you so much.
Good. That's good.
Someone is speaking. Thank you. So Todd, you get 2 minutes for your closing statement.
Oh, hi, thank you again for having me. I would also be honored to have your support. I have the support of former District Council member Lori Capitelli and the Planning Commission Chair Jeff Vincent, Mike Wilson, the Commissioner who's working closely with BFD on the Street Trauma Prevention Program. And I got a late start. I got sick in the spring and didn't take care of myself and got kind of a late start. And so I think maybe that's one of the reasons I haven't been able to garner the endorsements of council members at this point. Everybody is kind of looking to find out what they're protecting their interests, so to speak. I just wanted to say one of the best compliments I've had in this whole process from the spring, when I was able to talk with community leaders, District 5 residents, Berkeley firefighters, police association, on and on and on, just talking to a lot of community leaders. One of the best compliments I got was just from a District 5 resident who said, wow, I feel like we had a real conversation. So these formats aren't necessarily my forte. I want to talk to as many people in the district as possible and would encourage people to reach out to me on these issues. I just wanted to expand briefly on some of the things I said earlier. We have to focus on our core municipal responsibilities, folks. We have to get more out of the general fund in solving those problems. 20% of our residents, of our homeowners are below median income and others are in fixed incomes. Let's spend more money from the revenue that these new buildings generate, significant revenue. Let's spend more of that on our core municipal responsibilities. That might also help people to be more pro-housing, which we definitely need in the city. In terms of public safety, we have issues with morale and staffing, and that leads to budget busting overtime. So let's focus on that. Let's focus on that. And finally, I just want to say that anybody on this call can contact me at any time, reach out, and let's have one of those conversations. We need to proactively communicate with our neighbors throughout the city. Thanks so much again, and I'd be honored to have your support.
All right. Once again, thank you both so much for coming to our humble forum. We really appreciate it. You can look for the recording of this on YouTube early next week. We're going to take a very short break, and we're going to be back at 7:30, which is in less than a minute, for the District 6 forum. Okay, hi everybody, and welcome to the Future of Berkeley Candidate Forum on Climate, Housing, and Transportation. We just got finished earlier tonight doing a similar forum for District 2 and District 5. This hour is going to be our forum for District 6. My name is Jeff Baker. I'm the moderator of the forum, and I am the panelist from Berkeley Neighbors for Housing and Climate Action. I'm joined tonight by my co-host, Ben Gerdstein from Walk Bike Berkeley. Tonight we are joined by the candidates for D6. We've got Andy Katz and Brent Blackaby. We, by a coin toss, have chosen the first to introduce themselves. That'll be Andy Katz. You'll have a minute to introduce yourself, and we will alternate with questions between BNHCA and Walk Bike Berkeley, and you'll get 2 minutes to answer each question. The focus of our forum, of course, is housing, climate change, and transportation, which is consistent with the goals of these organizations. If there's any time left at the end of our 45 minutes, we are taking questions from the public. There will be, or is already, a form in the Zoom chat that you can submit a question if you want to be included. All of the participants on the call, except the candidates and the hosts, are muted, and the session is being recorded. We're going to post it on BNHCA's YouTube channel just as soon as we can. So let's go ahead and get started. Let me start my timer. I am keeping time. If if anybody goes way over time, I'll raise my Zoom hand, and then eventually I may break in. But for now, you've got a minute to introduce yourself, Mr. Andy Katz.
Hello, good evening, Berkeley Neighbors for Housing and Climate Action. I'm Andy Katz. I'm your East Bay MUD Director. I've been serving our community for the last 18 years in that office, and I've lived in Berkeley for over 26 years. I'm running for Berkeley City Council to address some of the most important issues that are facing our community and our city, specifically focusing on District 6 that ranges from fire safety and ensuring that we can be safe in our homes in this era of climate change, dramatically increasing the risk of wildfire. We have aging streets and infrastructure that we need to be repairing. We also have very important issues that are essential to our city infrastructure and public health, like losing Alta Bates Hospital, as well as our housing crisis that continues to get worse. I have a long and deep history supporting new housing development in Berkeley and in the Bay Area, starting with in 2001 when I was appointed to the Berkeley Zoning Adjustments Board. And having served on the zoning board for over 6 years, for almost 6 years, I was able to vote to permit 3,000 units of new housing just after an era where Berkeley hadn't been permitting housing in decades. That's the kind of leadership that I brought to Berkeley, being a part of our community and providing real solutions to the housing crisis. I've worked as an affordable housing developer. I've worked, I have a master's in city and regional planning, and will be very concerned about the issues that Berkeley Neighbors for Housing and Climate Action are concerned about. Proud to be endorsed by the Sierra Club, Berkeley Mayor Jesse Arreguín, and a majority of the Berkeley City Council. Thank you.
All right, thanks. And let's hear from Brent Blackaby.
Good evening. It's great to be here with Andy, with Walk Bike Berkeley, and with Berkeley Neighbors for Housing and Climate Action. My name is Brent Blackaby, and I'm running for City Council to bring fresh ideas, new leadership, and a real can-do attitude to solve the problems facing Berkeley: fire safety, housing affordability, home insurance, streets and transportation, public safety, and homelessness, among many others. My partner, Larry, and I have lived in District 6 for 20 years. We're raising 2 kids here. We're sending them to Berkeley Public Schools. So I have very deep roots here in District 6, and I have a commitment to making things better for this district and for the city. That's why I serve on the Berkeley Police Accountability Board. It's why I chair the Cragmont Elementary School Site Council. I serve on the Berkeley School District Safety Committee, and I'm currently organizing 200 of my neighbors in my neighborhood into a FireWise community for wildfire preparedness. I'm proud to have received 4 of the most important endorsements from validators that mean a lot here in District 6. From our Senator Nancy Skinner, from Assemblymember Buffy Wicks, who certainly are fighting for more housing across the state and see me as an ally in that work here in Berkeley. From our council member Susan Wengraf, who's represented and worked in service here to our district for at least 30 years and knows the district well, as well as the Berkeley firefighters, who know that we're in a fire zone and know that I've got a plan and ideas for how to keep us safe. These folks and many, many others know that I'm the right choice for District 6, and I look forward to the discussion tonight. Thanks so much.
Okay, great to meet you both. I am going to kick it off with one of the questions on the housing topic. So the city is currently evaluating the ways to implement its promise to enable missing middle housing. City Council committed to this several years ago, but no final action has been taken that would enable missing middle, and it may be delayed until the next term. If this issue does come before the council, what policies will you prefer and propose on the topic of missing middle housing? And because we're alternating here, we will stay with Brent for this one. You have 2 minutes.
Well, thanks for that question. I know we'll talk about a wide variety of housing topics. I support kind of an all of the above approach when it comes to housing development. When it comes to missing middle housing, I was there at the council meeting where it was last discussed. In District 6, we have some very kind of particular opportunities and constraints. We do live in a high fire hazard zone in much of the Hillside District, not all of it, but much of it. So I, again, organized an open letter with 300 of my neighbors where we expressed our strong support for missing middle housing across Berkeley, for adding gentle densification where we can, where it is safe to do so. We also realize that we do live and have some constraints here in the hills, being in proximity to the WUI, in a high fire hazard zone. And so my preference is that we focus as much as we can where it's safe to add the missing middle housing, to add duplex, triplex, fourplexes, and in high resource neighborhoods that aren't in the fire zone to start. That said, I also don't want to use the high fire hazard zone as an excuse. Like, it's not good enough to say that we can never do it. And so it also means that we have to redouble our efforts as a council to do the things that we have to do in the Hillside District and in other high fire zones to prepare ourselves for the ability to add more gentle density when we can. That means evacuation routes. That means getting some more of the cars off the streets so that there's better ingress and egress. And it means doing all of the fuel reduction and the home hardening that we need to prepare ourselves and make ourselves safe. So my view on this is we need to be doing missing middle. It's, you know, as Planning Director Klein said, it's not the only answer. You know, even if implemented at its best, we're talking about a few hundred, if you know, maybe 1,000 or 1,500 units. We still need 9,000 more units by 2031. So it's part of the solution, and it's, you know, it's part of the solution. It's not the only solution. The other thing I think we should be looking at in District 6 is not just building new housing, but also bringing housing online that exists. And I want to talk about that a little more tonight, which is there are existing units and there's some existing capacity that's not on the market, and how do we unlock that?
Okay, thanks. 2 minutes to you, Andy Katz, same question.
Yes, I think the middle housing proposal has a good deal of merit as one component of many in the Berkeley housing element. When we're talking about the areas that are not in our fire zones 2 and 3, where we have very high severity risk of wildfire hazard. So what we need to be doing is thinking about all of the tools in our toolbox and being especially careful about where is it unsafe to have structural density structures that are within 5 feet of each other, having the inability for residents to evacuate in a wildfire hazard event, in an emergency. And so what I think we need to do is wait for the evacuation study to come out. But frankly, we do know a good deal about evacuation risk. We know that we will not all of those that live in districts 5 and 6 will not be able to make it out on time in the event of a wildfire. The question is, you know, how many? The question is what can we do to improve that situation? And so I'm very eager to hear what the evacuation study finds and to see what we're able to do next. But I do think it's important that Berkeley move forward with building more housing. I'm very committed to seeing that gentle density throughout the city to be able to advance affirmatively fair housing, and to make sure that this works, that we look at renderings and see, you know, how will this really work in context with our existing neighborhoods. So I'm interested in participating, collaborating with the council to make this idea go forward.
All right, thanks. Ben is going to give you a question from Walk Bike Berkeley.
Hello. All right, so we'll start with this one. Walk Bike Berkeley supports the Safe Streets Measure FF, because it's the most fiscally responsible and effective way to fix our crumbling streets while also updating them with life-saving mobility and safety improvements that help us achieve our climate goals. We oppose Measure EE. Will you please explain your positions on Measures FF and EE?
There we go. Andy, that'll be your 2 minutes.
Okay, I support Measure FF. I think it is very important that we have a revenue source to be able to do the street repair that needs to be done. We have a PCI score that is falling well below where we ought to be. But what I found very sobering about the city manager's analysis is that neither measure gets us there. Both measures leave us approximately running in place. I do support Measure FF because it is the measure that has more ambition. It does have us having a slightly higher PCI score than the Measure EE. But really, we actually need both. If both measures had written themselves to both allow themselves to be enacted, we would actually need both of them and a significant match from the general fund to really be able to get to where we need to be. I think it's important that we recognize that and work together as a community to be able to raise those resources for the money. I do support the feature of Measure FF that includes funding for safety. I think that's when we look at the pedestrian and bicycle fatalities and injuries, that tells us that we do need to make some investments. I think we have a lot of applications for that, particularly in District 6. We have very failing walking paths, and that definitely need safety features. So I'm excited to be able to do that work with our streets, with our sidewalks, with our walking paths, and to make sure that we're able to have a safer Berkeley and a Berkeley where our streets can be safer. So I support that. With Measure E, I do not have a formal position, but I think it's so important that we have revenue. And I wish that we could have had more council intervention, more council leadership to be able to have not had competing measures. But these are the choices that Berkeley voters have. And so that's I'm very hopeful that Berkeley voters will pass Measure FF, and that we will, in the event that Measure FF doesn't have the most votes, that we will still have a measure that passes.
Well, thanks for that question. I see Ray up on the phone. I'll just comment at the outset that I was part of people, including Ray and Jenny Wong and others, that were trying to, and Ben Gould and others, were trying to sort of bridge the divide and end up with one measure. And I do regret the fact that we were so close in many ways, and yet so far to end up with two measures, because by far the preference would have been to have one measure that worked and could alleviate all the concerns. As again, a political practitioner, it's never good to have two competing measures on the ballot. There's always the chance that the two measures will tank each other. That said, I am a strong supporter of Measure FF. I think it goes farther towards looking at the solution comprehensively. Street paving absolutely is a critical component of this. As I recall, we have something like $200 million of deferred maintenance on streets and sidewalks and safety improvements. And it's, it will take us decades to do that without the incremental revenue that we get from Measure FF. So I'm strongly in support of Measure FF. I think it's good for paving, it's good for sidewalks, it's good for the paths. We have a lot of paths in the hills. That's an important part here, since we don't always have sidewalks on these streets, we do have paths. And safety improvements. Look, Marin Avenue alone, we've had 6 fatalities in the past handful of years of people traveling up and down Marin Avenue. Not to mention at other dangerous intersections all across the city. It's just not acceptable. And if we're going to get to our Vision Zero goal, we need to invest in safety alongside paving. That's why I do support FF. Bottom line is we need one of these measures to pass. I strongly prefer FF. We cannot be in a position where they both fail. And so I'm also glad to see that both FF and EE, for the most part, have been running positive campaigns promoting the respective benefits of each measure, while trying not to sort of tear the other down as much, because again, ultimately, we need a measure to pass. I just strongly happen to prefer FF.
All right, thanks. Let's return to our housing topic. So thinking about another part of the housing element, City Council is committed to adding housing along our high resource commercial corridors. These are places like Solano Avenue, North Shattuck, College Avenue in the Elmwood. Thinking about your district, District 6, what high resource area comes to mind? How do you think it fits into that plan? And what would you do to fulfill this commitment in those places? Brent, we'll stay with you for 2 minutes.
I mean, look, District 6, again, is sort of a unique region in the city in the sense that we literally have one commercial block in District 6, and it happens to be one block of Euclid where it hits Hearst near the university campus. And that's the very south end of District 6. It's a very residential neighborhood. We do not have a lot of arterials. We do not have proximity to BART stations. I do think, and that's why, as we talked about kind of missing middle earlier, and as I've been also talking about, as I've been talking to people in the district, this opportunity to unlock existing infrastructure that exists in in-law units and ADUs that aren't currently being rented. I think the way that we're going to look at development and adding housing density, once we, again, first we have to deal with the fire threat and make sure we mitigate that and are safe in terms of evacuation and safe in terms of preparing for the threat. But the way it's going to look in District 6 is much more like missing middle. That said, I'm going to be a city council member that is looking at housing across Berkeley. And so we'll certainly support higher density along North Shattuck, certainly support higher density along Solano, along the San Pablo corridor, or along sort of central parts of University, along College. There are lots of areas in this city where we have the transportation infrastructure, proximity to transit, where we can do denser development. And I absolutely support that. That's also, again, why Senator Skinner and Assemblymember Wicks are supporting me in this race, because they know I'll be an advocate and a strong voice for that pro-housing policy on the council. But we also, again, have to be thoughtful about what that looks like in District 6. And the fact is we have limited bus transportation. Bus transportation is being even more and more restricted. We have small streets, tight streets, cars parked on streets. And so again, I think the way we will deal with housing in District 6 looks a little bit different, but we need to play our part. And then we will support greater density across as much of Berkeley as we can where we do have transportation and transit infrastructure to support it.
All right, thanks. Same question to you, Andy.
I also support zoning for housing along North Shattuck, along Solano Avenue and College Avenue, maintaining a mixed use retail component where it's appropriate to support residents being able to obtain goods and services locally. District 6 is primarily a residential area that has very narrow streets, does not have the transportation infrastructure to be able to support the same kind of density that we're talking about on those other corridors that are really very clearly arterials in our community and are not in fire zones. However, it did make sense to have Jordan Court, which is at Spruce and Cedar. That new senior affordable housing is a wonderful addition to District 6. There may be a couple other sites that make sense. I think there may be property owners that have opportunity sites that are in that immediate vicinity, and it would be up to them. You know, those are very established uses, like churches and other community centers. But those would be the types of sites that, if they chose that it made sense for them, then those areas could work for denser housing. But the most of District 6 does not make sense for that level of density for the reasons that Brent and I are discussing, that we don't have the infrastructure to be able to move people in and out. We don't have the transit support. I am proud to be endorsed by our AC Transit Director, Gene Walsh, and our Park Director, Rebecca Saltzman, because I've been working with them for decades on transit issues and improving our transit service citywide as well as in District 6. And those are issues that we do need to improve, but it also means that we need to have a careful match between where do we have high quality transit, high frequency transit, and where are we building our new housing. And we do need to make sure that we build that new housing for the 9,000 plus units called for in Berkeley's housing element. And I believe that these corridors are very important. That the corridors that I mentioned and are called for in the question are very important for accomplishing that.
All right, thanks. Let's get a question from Ben again.
All right, again. So touching on the subject we've already heard a little bit about, the climate crisis is exacerbating long-standing wildfire risks in D6 and other areas of the hills. Meanwhile, cars are the biggest source of climate emissions in Berkeley. And on-street parking often makes emergency access challenging in many parts of the hills. So putting all that together, what are your ideas for reducing car dependency in the hills?
We have a lot of challenges being able to achieve the vision of reducing car dependency to a significant extent because of our topography. The hills are very steep. We don't have very high quality transit service. We can change the high quality transit service, but we certainly can't change the steepness of our hills. So I think it would be one way to look at it would be to examine where are the opportunities for improving transit frequency. frankly, it's going to be a very long time before we have sustainable regional transit finance that actually allows our transit agency to be able to provide that level of frequency that actually enables people to get out of their cars. I studied transportation planning at UC Berkeley. I understand that the science of mode share and when do people actually get out of their cars. And that level of service, I think we're a ways away from that, with the 65 only running at 40 minutes headways, and they're about to extend that to 45. And we don't know if AC Transit is actually going to go forward, and hopefully they do not change our headways on the 67 from 30 minutes to 60 minutes. That's the wrong direction. We really need to be going in the opposite direction. If we could get to transit headways that were closer to 10 or 15 minutes, then we would be able to do that. We did have streetcars that actually used to do that a very long time ago, but we need that revenue. And so AC Transit right now is not inclined to be providing those resources to District 6. I think we need to restore our weekend service first, and then be looking how do we go beyond that. So I think that's the place to look, is looking at improving our transit service. And that's the most important thing to be doing, to encourage people to have transportation choices, and to be able to have more of our residents able to get around and enjoy the whole city of Berkeley. We can do things to improve bicycle access, making sure that we are careful about where do we have safer streets, better paved streets, so that we don't have that kind of risk when you're a cyclist and you might fall over due to a pothole. I think that's making sure that we have safe corridors where we're able to get through to where district residents need. I'm very excited about e-bikes, making that more of a reality. So those are the best ideas right now to be able to advance Berkeley District 6 residents having more transportation choices.
Thanks for the question. I agree with Andy. We do have some challenges when it comes to transportation frequency up here. I met with our AC Transit Director, Gene Walsh, a couple of weeks ago. We talked a bit about the criteria that AC Transit is using to determine where they prioritize their resources. And the fact is they are looking at things like equity, like, populations that don't have access to other means of transportation, income levels, to help prioritize the map. I asked her, would they consider inserting some sort of a consideration for fire safety and other public safety considerations? And it's just not a part of the calculation right now in terms of how they optimize these routes. And she said, look, that is something to look into, right? It at least needs to be part of the bundle of criteria that are considered when you look at bus transit. I've knocked on 3,000 to 5,000 doors in the district. And a lot of the folks up here are retired, are of an age where they don't want to necessarily be driving. If they had access to more regular bus service, they would do it, and they've asked for it. And so part of this is, again, some kind of negotiation with AC Transit to try and improve the frequency and try and make the case that there is a public safety, fire safety element here that needs to be considered in the same set of criteria that they're looking at others. And it's just not right now. So that's part number one. I also asked her a little bit, because there have been some ideas about, well, hey, can you do it more frequently, run smaller buses more frequently? Is that part of the solution? And she said, unfortunately, no, right? It's actually not the equipment that's the bulk of the cost, it's the labor. And so whether you're running a big bus once every 40 minutes or two smaller buses every 20 minutes, you're doubling the labor cost, and that's much more costly than the equipment itself. So looking at trying to explore some of the other alternatives, are there creative means that we can do that? But anyway, I think it does come back to how they prioritize the routes and trying to make the case that we need more frequent service. The other thing I think I'd just say is, in terms of safety and parking on the streets, we need to do more red striping in places where, again, there's not a lot of access. We need to make it safer. We need to improve pedestrian infrastructure. We need to improve the pathways, make it and encourage people to use other means other than cars, bicycles, to walk, in addition to the public transit, and we can do a lot better job on all those elements.
All right. There we go. Lower my hand. I would like to stay on this topic, at least generally. When you think about the City of Berkeley's Climate Action Plan and our most recent annual progress report that indicates that we are not on pace to hit most of our goals by 2030, especially in terms of transportation and energy used by housing. As a council person representing the city and representing your district, what would be the most important thing that you would want to do to get us on track to meet the goals and commitments of the Climate Action Plan? And we'll do 2 minutes with you first, Brent.
Okay. Well, as you mentioned, I mean, again, there are two key prongs to that, kind of getting that back on track. One certainly is emissions, car emissions, transportation. The other thing is certainly around building standards, building codes, building electrification. We know that in the wake of the recent Supreme Court case that struck down Berkeley's natural gas ordinance, we're going to have to find some other creative ways of getting at that. And rather than regulating hookups, we have to do it in the spirit of kind of emissions standards and expectations in the housing and in the buildings themselves. So I think, again, I think it's multiple pieces. On the building side, it's about building standards, setting those building standards. It's about the electrification strategy that we have. And it's about, like, again, helping folks make that transition, especially folks from lower income households who may not be able to sort of literally flip the switch and do that. We're going to have to help subsidize that and help facilitate that so that people can do the right thing that they want to do and move to more electric inside the homes. On the transportation side, I think it comes back to what we were talking about with safe streets, in the sense that we need to fund the bicycle plan. We need to fund the pedestrian plan. We need to be able to pave and add safety improvements to make all those alternative means of transportation more possible along the plans that the city of Berkeley have already approved. That's not to say we're going to put a cycle track on every street, but it's to say we've identified what we want to do. Let's go fund that and make it more possible for people to get across the city, not in cars. It also means more transit-oriented development so that people are not traveling as far in cars and can get home because they're near a transit stop. So I think, again, it's hard to pick one item. If I were to pick one, I think it's the transportation piece is the most kind of gettable, in the sense that, like, we have measures on the ballot to fund new transportation infrastructure, and to start doing the bike plan, to start doing the pedestrian plan, and to start making those moves to encourage people to use non-gas powered cars. And then I think, behind that would be to continue on the electrification strategy that the city's already set out.
All right, let's hear from Andy Katz on the same topic.
Yes, I agree with Brent on many of these ideas. I think these are areas where the city is very united, and we need to be looking at how do we move forward in each of these sectors. We have a climate crisis. We need to do it as much as we can to be able to reduce emissions as fast as we can. And where we can do that faster with our buildings is, certainly I support the air district standards to be able to advance our reduction in greenhouse gas emissions for buildings, particularly in our HVAC and our home water heating. But we can also do something really unique in Berkeley, which is to provide incentives. I worked with the city council, particularly former council member Harrison, to ensure that we could have this pilot program that's starting off as what's called the Just Transition Electrification Program. I had started a program very similar to that at East Bay Mud, specific to sewer laterals, and it was incredibly successful and brought that program to the city of Berkeley. And now it's just getting started. But the problem is we don't have funding. So we do need to create some funding that comes from a reasonable source that can be broadly accepted. We do need to put our minds together and to have public workshops and support from the city to be able to come up with the kind of incentive funding source that would really work. I had proposed something similar to that when I was on the steering committee that formed EBCE, which is now AVA. That is our agency that's providing 100% renewable energy to Berkeley residents. So when forming that agency, I had proposed something very similar. They ended up just deciding to create a surplus. I think now it's time to take that surplus and put some of that funding into electrification in our communities. Moving over to transportation, I think it's about transit funding. It's about making sure that our voice is, as a part of the urban core of the Bay Area, isn't left behind. It's tragic that we had a regional funding measure that collapsed, and the fact that that measure collapsed puts even more pressure on what happens in the next ballot cycle, where we're expecting to have an affordable housing measure on the ballot this year, and that's not going to get to move forward this year. I think it's really important that transit not fall behind. We are really at the brink of a downward spiral of transit. And so making sure that our regional leaders are hearing from Berkeley, so that Alameda County's delegates to MTC and Berkeley's representative to ACTC hear that we want to make sure that we have funding for transit operations. I think that is critical, and that we're focusing our density on the areas with that high frequency transit, so that our new residents in Berkeley are more likely to be living in a way where we don't have the same level of greenhouse gas emissions. We have lower greenhouse gas emissions because of that access to transit. I agree that we need to be funding bike infrastructure and implementing the bicycle plan, learning from our lessons about what's worked and what needs improvement. And there's so much more we can do.
Let's hear what the last question is from Walk Bike Berkeley.
All right. Our last question focuses on staff. Berkeley needs a skilled, motivated, and fully staffed public works department to update our streets with safety and climate-friendly infrastructure. But the city has had persistent problems attracting and retaining great staff. How would you help address this problem as a council member?
I think that it's important to make sure that we have high morale in the city of Berkeley. The way that council members interact with our staff, treat our staff, needs to be at a high road. Working at East Bay Mud as a member of the board of directors, I'm proud that we have very high morale, that we have that our employees feel like East Bay Mud is a great place to work. And for that reason, we have very long retention rates. We have people who are really happy to go to their jobs. So, having worked on the board of a public works agency for 18 years, I feel like I can bring that skill, that expertise to the city of Berkeley, because the city of Berkeley is facing a very serious staffing crisis, a very serious morale crisis. And we need new leadership that's going to be able to bring those kinds of lessons learned from an agency that's actually been successful. So I think we need to be surveying our staff, doing exit interviews to identify why have people been leaving, ask people what they want, in terms of staying, and very importantly, providing a positive culture, a positive working environment, providing the resources to be able to get their jobs done, not overworking staff, and making sure that we're actually providing adequate staffing, so that we don't have staff that feel overburdened and that they're forced to deliver work products that end up falling short if that's the particular problem. So it's multifaceted, but those are some trends from talking with council members, talking with members of the Transportation Infrastructure Commission, that I've gathered, talking with city workers to understand where are we having challenges recruiting and retaining high quality staff. I think this is how we get the work done. We need to solve this problem.
Well, thanks for that question. I agree with Andy. This is a multifaceted problem, but it's key. Solving this problem is key to sort of getting us back on track. Certainly starting from the position of, making sure salary and benefits are competitive, making sure people feel like they're getting enough training and support, even just the quality of the workspace itself, the work environment, that we show respect by investing in making it a place where people want to come work. I mean, I think that's all kind of like table stakes, right? Getting in the game. The second thing I'd say in terms of process is, working with the new city manager and the council to set clear priorities. There's nothing worse, and we've all been in those work environments where you feel like you're working on staff and feel like you're pulled in a dozen directions and doing everything like 20% well. Maybe I feel like that some days on the campaign, where it's like I'm not being a great dad, I'm not being a great worker, I'm not doing anything 100%. I'm doing everything 30, 20%. So setting clear priorities and just being clear as a council and a body with the city manager, like, here's what's most important. Here's the set of things we really care about. Let's go get those and succeed at those. I think that's an important part. Look, I think if Measure FF passes, which again, good chance, and or Measure EE, but hopefully Measure FF, there's also a huge opportunity. We should sell the opportunity here, which is that Berkeley for the first time is investing a significant amount of money in addressing infrastructure here, repaving streets, bikes, sidewalks, paths. Like, sell it. This is an opportunity to really do something that changes the game here in Berkeley, and you can be a part of that. Like, I think we should also lean into that and use that not as a negative, but as a positive. And again, as a marketer, as a business person, that's something I'm familiar with. Last idea I have, and this comes from my service on the Police Accountability Board. As you know, the PAB, one of the fundamental responsibilities is holding accountable officers who aren't doing a good job, who aren't living up to standards. And that is a part of the role and discipline and working with the chief on that. But equally important and often not recognized in the mission is the mission of commendation, which is to say, hold up good examples of good employees doing good work and set those as examples. I think we should be doing the same thing in every department in the city. Say, this is great work, right? We're not just complaining when stuff's not going right. We're saying this is great work. Here's a great employee doing great work. We honor that, we respect that, and we want more of that. That's something as a city council person, I would love to take on and play that kind of role to recognize. I think all of those things would help morale and contribute to being a better place where we could attract more people.
All right. Great. That is the end of our 6-question agenda, and we've saved time for each of you to give 2 minutes. I'll let you take a breath. It's a quirk of this format that you've got to go twice in a row. So let's give 2 minutes back to Brent, and then we'll hear from Andy last. Go ahead.
Right. Okay. Deep breath. Thanks, Ben and Jeff. Thanks again to Walk Bike Berkeley. Thanks to Berkeley Neighbors for Housing Climate Action for having us tonight. Andy, it was great to be with you as well. We're nearing the end of the forums, but thanks for joining as well. I'm running for City Council because I'm committed to going to work every day for the people of Berkeley and for District 6. I want to solve problems and get things done on the issues that matter. Housing, climate, as we talked about, streets and transportation, crime and public safety, wildfire safety. I'm someone who puts in the work in everything that I do, as a dad, as a community leader, as a small business owner, as a candidate. And that's what I'll do on City Council. That's what I've done my entire career. The experience I've gained from my time on the Police Accountability Board, on the Berkeley School District Safety Committee, as chair of the Cragmont School Site Council, and in organizing 200 of my neighbors into a Firewise community. In addition, 20 years ago, I founded a digital agency to help Democrats win online. And since that time, we've helped elect 20 Democrats to the US Senate by powering their digital campaigns. Folks like Elizabeth Warren and Chuck Schumer and Barbara Boxer. We've raised $100 million for progressive causes. We've helped labor unions organize, AFSCME, carpenters, UFCW, and others. We've also done good work for Planned Parenthood, LCB, and the California Democratic Party. Now I've got kids in school, and I want to take those same skills. I want to bring that same kind of innovation, organizing ability to solve problems right here in Berkeley. That's why I'm running. I've lived in this district for 20 years. I know the district well. I know the people well. I know the issues well. Focused on making things better. I'm proud to have been endorsed by 4 real key voices here in this race. Former Senator Nancy Skinner and Assemblymember Buffy Wicks, because they'll know I will fight to make housing more affordable and accessible across Berkeley. I'm so proud to have been endorsed by Councilmember Susan Wengraff, who served our district for more than 30 years. She knows this place better than anybody. She knows more people here, but more than anybody, and I'm honored to have her support. I'm also honored to have the support of the Berkeley firefighters because I have a commitment to addressing the wildfire threat and keeping Berkeley safe while keeping our first responders safe. I'm so proud of the work we've done in this campaign. We're building a strong grassroots effort. I've knocked on 3,000 to 5,000 doors in the district, as I mentioned, and I learned so much from every conversation. That's going to make me a better representative on the City Council. I will put in the work as District 6 next council member because I care about and I'm invested in this district and this community. I'd really appreciate the support of Walk Bike Berkeley and Berkeley Neighbors for housing and climate action in this campaign, and hopefully the opportunity to work together on these shared issues of concern in the weeks and months ahead. Thank you so much for having me tonight.
All right, thanks for joining us. The floor is yours, Andy Katz.
Thank you, Berkeley Neighbors for Housing and Climate Action and Walk Bike Berkeley for hosting us tonight. I am running for Berkeley City Council District 6 to take my 25 years of public service in Berkeley to the City Council, where I feel like we are at a very important crossroads in the city of Berkeley in terms of having the knowledge and the know-how to be able to carry our city forward with so much change happening in Berkeley. I've worked for the people of Berkeley on our most pressing challenges for over 25 years. And as a council member, I will be the candidate who brings the experience and stability that our city needs. Having served for 18 years of service as our elected East Bay Mud Director, tripling our rate of pipeline replacements, making sure that we are able to reinvest in our infrastructure. That's the kind of can-do spirit that I want to take to the Berkeley City Council, to be able to work with community residents and advocates like you, and make sure that we can actually achieve the goals of revitalizing our infrastructure. I'm a former chair of Sierra Club, California. I've served as chair of the Berkeley Labor Commission, former chair of the Community Health Commission, a member of the Disaster and Fire Safety Commission, and a former member of the Berkeley Zoning Adjustments Board. That leadership on the Berkeley Zoning Adjustments Board was part of Berkeley's transformation of how we became a city that was resistant to all new housing, to a city that was a housing leader in the region. I'm very proud to have been a part of that from my early years on the Zoning Adjustments Board to working with Mayor Bates on the downtown plan. And I'm proud to be endorsed by Mayor Bates and former Senator Lonnie Hancock because of that work that I have done working with our city leadership to be able to be a city that is pro-housing and is pro-environment. As an environmental advocate, I have helped founded East Bay Clean Energy, which is delivering 100% renewable energy to Berkeley residents. On the board of East Bay Mud, I've made high fire risk brush removal a top priority at East Bay Mud. So these are the issues that I care about and that the district cares about. I'm someone who will bring that experience and expertise to the city council. I'm someone who gets things done and has been dedicated to public service in the city of Berkeley. That's why I'm very proud to be endorsed by the Sierra Club, by the Alameda Labor Council, by our Mayor Jesse Arreguin, and a majority of the Berkeley City Council, our Supervisor Keith Carson, as well as the California Democratic Party. Those are the points of leadership that I'm very proud of to have worked with many of these folks to contribute to our city, and look forward to ensuring that Berkeley remains a city that values housing, that values inclusion and affordable housing, and a city that it takes climate action and our leadership in the region very seriously. Have a good evening, and it was great to be with you here tonight.
All right, thanks. And once again, thank you both for attending our forum. We really appreciate it. And the recording of this event will be on YouTube as soon as we can get it there. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks again.